The Daily Mail. Evil super gang seizes 4 apartment complexes in San Antonio.
Well, that's only a handful, Tim.
It is true. I think.
What's a super gang? I like that. Sounds like something Trump would say. I kind of like that. Super gang.
They're a super gang. Very big. Not good.
It's like some horrible crossover between the X-Men and a gang.
It's a transnational gang.
Wow.
So remember when we were all like, oh, hey, geez, wow, they're taking over apartments in Aurora, and the media went, no, they're not. Now they've graduated to, but it's only a handful. Now we're up to, yes, but only a handful in a few cities. We are literally at the point where a foreign, invasive, violent faction has entered this country by force with guns and are occupying areas in New York City, San Antonio, Aurora, and I guarantee you many other cities we don't yet know about.
Yep.
Texas.
And guess what?
Jeez.
Anytime any of those stories get brought up, they're going to scoff at it too. They're not going to
say
care.
it's not true.
It's no big deal. And then you
It's
know
only
what?
a handful in a few
then,
cities.
If and when that becomes the status quo, because Kamala Harris gets elected, naturalizes all the illegals in every swing state that she's placed, and then Democrats win every election forever, what's going to happen eventually is this will become commonplace, and they will say, there was never a time in American history where this didn't happen. This was always the norm. We just weren't talking about it. Whenever the left makes life worse for everyone or their policies completely fail and destroy our standard of living or decrease it, they go, well, that's always how it was. We've always had rolling blackouts, guys. Like, what do you mean? Oh, come on. Everyone used to have electricity. That was
Seamus,
propaganda.
Fire and brimstone has always rained down from the heavens.
Exactly.
It's
always happened.
There's nothing we can do about it. None of our behavior should change. Let's just keep living the way we are.
We have kind of a preview looking at Europe. They're about 10 years further down the road than us. You know, you have all these kind of no-go zones for police where you have these enclaves of Islamic Sharia law where there's just no rule of law. There's no Western rule of law in those zones.
It's an invasion. It's a
absolutely.
literal invasion. You have people. If you've gotten to the point where police officers are no longer able to enforce the country's decided upon laws within a particular region, that region belongs to somebody else, right? That's insurrection. It is. If you want to talk about insurrection, that is sedition.
It's worse than January 6th, even.
Letting them come and do whatever they want.
If you allow people to take over a neighborhood and then your country's laws no longer apply to that particular region, they've effectively seceded. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah. Sedition. A seditious conspiracy, in fact.
Yeah.
Maybe they should get 20 years in prison.
No, that's never going to happen. They're not going to get in trouble. They should send them back, though.
You guys got to watch last night's episode with Rudyard Lynch. A lot of people are messaging saying it was one of the best episodes they've ever seen. And the members only was also one of the best members only we've ever done.
No pressure, Joel.
But I don't want to necessarily repeat things that were said because they were like up there. And I'll leave it at that. But I recommend you watch last night's episode. It got really heated around like about 40 minutes in when Rudyard started getting into history of falling dynasties, civil war, revolutions. And let's just say that he gave specific examples of various collapses of societies throughout history to what we see today. And then he made a rather extreme prediction, which is the most extreme prediction I've heard anyone give. And he's very convincing because he's like, I don't know, robotic almost. He's not animated or holding up a sign saying the end is nigh. He's simply saying like, well, what we saw with the French Revolution is the king trying to suspend Parliament refusing. And then overnight you get civil war, you get violence, you get riots. And it was a series of revolutions. In fact, it wasn't just one. He said.
And counter-revolutions.
Right. It was
fighting back.
And then you got the empire. And then he said that he has a bet with a friend that the United States will see 1,000 political deaths domestically by April.
Wow.
And I'm thinking like, okay, I got optimism bias and normalcy bias. That's not going to happen.
Well, you know,
Mr. Civil War?
Yeah.
You don't think it's going to happen?
Yeah, because, and this was another point of the conversation. Mr. Civil War is, I read an article in a newspaper and then they said a civil war may be coming. Now, I don't know when or how that would happen, but I can't imagine a scenario that 1,000 people die. I mean,
yeah.
we certainly postulated and came up with potentialities of how it could happen. But I'm like, I don't know about that by April. And, he's a smart guy. And he laid out his arguments, and they're very convincing. Political crisis. He said, we're at a point in this country where it is obvious both sides do not care to convince each other. They care to only convince each other that they have plausible deniability to engage in whatever behavior they need to in order to take power. He also said he thought Trump is going to win the election, but that Democrats are going to reject it. This is going to lead to a political crisis, and then so on and so forth.
What was it? They had a couple of FBI whistleblowers on Capitol Hill a few weeks ago. I can't remember who these guys were or what they were whistleblowing about, kind of the corruption that's going on in the FBI. But at the end of the whistleblower's testimony, this FBI agent said, my advice to the American people right now is to buy guns and ammo and hunker down. And hearing that from an FBI whistleblower, it has a little more weight than just some random guy. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, what does he mean?
You know,
what's coming?
One of the most important things he said was that people have this thing in their mind where they believe it happens slowly. But every single instance has been a overnight thing. And he mentioned the Bolsheviks were about 3% of the country in Russia, and they took power. You do not need, and I've been banging my head on the table telling people this. They don't get it. Like Bill Maher, like there's not going to be. This was talk 4 years ago when Bill Maher was talking about civil war, saying no, it's not going to happen. And people seem to think you need a Mason-Dixon line. See, people seem to think that you need two opposing state factions that align themselves. None of this is true. People seem to think, no, but you need like large populations. Never the case. That famous quote is, what is it, like, never let it be said that a small group of dedicated people can't change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. When you look at almost every revolution or civil war or conflict, it happens seemingly overnight, and it happens with a relatively small group of people. Granted, to be fair, the American Civil War did take a very, very long time.
And people don't realize how weird and bizarre the level of peace and prosperity we've enjoyed for the last 60 years is.
Yeah.
It is an anomaly. And it's just the last 20 years, it seems like a lot of groundwork has been set for hard times to come again. Not to be pessimistic or anything.
No,
but I don't think it's pessimism. I think it's just
realism, right?
Yeah, we have lived in a golden age.
Yeah,
where we have morbidly obese homeless people.
Yeah,
like this is incongruous with reality. It cannot be sustained. Morbidly obese homeless people. It seems to be paradoxical in a sense.
We've solved hunger. I was doing this research when I was looking into the free school lunch programs that Tim Walz is doing and some of these other governors are doing, and I wanted some figures on how many kids have died of starvation in the last 10, 20 years in the United States. The answer is 0. There have been no kids that have died from starvation, unless it was like an abusive.
But they are dying of heart attacks and stuff.
Right? Yeah, heart attacks, cancer, obesity, all that stuff. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean,
I'll tell you what,
Bobby. I'll tell you what. Well, no, I mean, we have in this particular country solved hunger. The issue is, people. I hate to quote him, but as Jordan B. Peterson always says, they want to compare it to the hypothetical.
Now you have to do it in his voice.
It's like, man, people are trying to compare this country to the hypothetical utopia in their mind and not reality. That's why it's all falling apart, man. But
they're chimpanzees full of snakes.
When I was in college, I had a conversation with a woman. I remember I believe this is in 2015, and we were all out to dinner, and there was a shooting in France. Some Islamic extremists.
Is this the Bataclan?
I believe so. And I remember looking at my phone, reading the death toll, seeing that it had increased, and I was horrified. I was, upset about it. And she said, "You're only upset because it's happening in a first world country." And I said, "Correct, because the entire world has been dangerous for all of history. And over the last 100 years, we've created small, isolated pockets where people can be safe and they don't have to worry about being killed in their day-to-day lives. And when those parts of the world become less safe, the third world doesn't become more safe. The whole world just gets less safe."
That's a good point.
Yeah. So basically, you admitted you were a bigot?
Yeah, exactly. It's bigoted to be concerned about the fact that the first world is becoming less safe and people are more likely to be murdered by radical Islamic extremists. That is bigotry. That's fascism.
War and conflict is the norm for Earth.
Yeah.
And we have had this, I guess 2 generations of prosperity. 3 now. Mm-hmm. I guess it's Gen X. Man, I got to give a shout out again to Dickie Bear, because I was saying this the other day on my morning show. I was talking to Dickie. He's the lead singer of Mighty Mighty Bosstones. They broke up over his rejection of vaccine mandates, among other things. But that was basically it. So, you know, he wrote the song "The Impression That I Get." You guys remember that song, right? Mm-hmm. He has this great line in it. I was talking to him about how I wish I introduced them on stage at Rescue the Republic, because I had this whole thing where I said, there's a line in the song, "I'm not a coward, I've just never been tested. I'd like to think that if I was, I would pass. See all the tested and think there, but for the grace go I. I'm not a coward, but I'm afraid of what I might find out." And as the story goes, I'll give you the simple version of the speech. When Dickie was working for ABC, he was the announcer for Jimmy Kimmel. They vaccine mandated their employees. And he said, this makes no sense. You know, if I work remote, I'm not in studio, why do I have to do this? So I refuse. He got fired. A very high-paying, high-profile job. He refused to back down. And I told him, I said, bro, you were tested and you passed, right? He wrote the song 30 years ago, and he was saying he didn't know if he was a coward or not, but it turns out he was not. And then he told me he wrote that song because his generation had no great conflict. Like the people who came before him had Vietnam. And he was thinking to himself that, like, we grew up in this time where we didn't go fight. We didn't go to war. We just had it all. And so he was like, here I am, it's the 90s, and I'm thinking, like, knock on wood that something like this happens to me. I've not had to deal with that. And I don't know how I would act if something like that actually did happen. So Gen Xers, millennials, Gen Z, no conflict. Turmoil a little bit here and there, but that's not conflict. And
I think we've been programmed too, or at least our generation, to feel guilty for the amount of prosperity that we've had. You know, there's that. I remember Louis C.K. was on Joe Rogan, and he was talking about how it's weird that we have it so good here. That's not right. Yeah, we have it so good here. It shouldn't be that way. You know, it's
all woven with guilt. I mean, even Seamus's anecdote. This girl is trying to sort of holier than thou respond to as if you are in the wrong for feeling sad that people are affected by a shooting or something horrible in France. Well, but you should feel even worse because actually you don't feel guilty enough about the things that happen to people in places that are even more dangerous. I mean, it's a logic that is built on sort of self-flagellation always.
Yeah, exactly. And these are the kinds of people. Notably. These are the kinds of people like, don't you know that the last shoebill sandpiper is having its habitat destroyed for capital? And
but they're not going to
who cares if people die? You only care because they're in the first world.
Right. They're also not
stepping on the turtle eggs.
Yeah. They're also not doing anything to preserve the rare whatever. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like they want you to feel bad because they know about this thing, but have they donated to a cause? Have they built the correct habitat? Like, no.
Exactly.
Honest question, like, what is it about people that they hate humans so much? So
they hate their fathers in a lot of instances.
We did this show a couple of years ago with the Daily Wire. Jeremy Boring was on the show, and he made a really great point that, this was here actually at our old studio. And Jeremy, he's a co-CEO Daily Wire. He was talking about how we do everything for humans. We don't do anything not for humans. It is, and he didn't say it like this, but his point was, it is the human experience for which we are in pursuit of everything. If there are no humans, and he said, obviously we want to be good stewards of the earth. We want to take care of it and all of God's creation, but we do everything for other people. So, and he's completely right. Our motivations are social.
Or ourselves.
Right. Yeah. But it's human. It's humanity. I think that's particularly interesting. If there's no humans, then who cares?
Well, yeah. I mean, the kind of self-congratulatory sentimentalism that they indulge in and shed a tear and pat themselves in the back for how virtuous they are because they care about the 1,000 remaining Kenyan Harolas is also a human experience, ironically. So they'll say, oh, I really care about this particular thing that's happening somewhere in the world, and they won't do anything about it, but they'll like care about it.
They
and they'll
care
feel
about
good about
humanity
themselves.
In the abstract.
Yeah, or it's true. Then they care about certain animals in the abstract. But you're absolutely correct. Ultimately, it's really easy to care about humans as an abstract because the abstract idea of humanity doesn't ask anything of you. The abstract idea of humanity, here's a fact. It's actually just you. Like, whenever you say you love humanity and you're only talking about humanity in the abstract, what you're saying is you love yourself. Because these people never do anything for other people in the particular. They only talk about humanity as a whole because that doesn't demand anything of you. It allows you to continue to behave selfishly. And again, you get to pat yourself on the back with the self-congratulatory moralist sentimentalism.
We didn't get into
it's narcissism.
The story, but the FBI crime data.
Oh my gosh.
They revised it. It's up 4.5%, not down. They lied.
Yeah, of course.
But Merrick Garland praised himself.
Can I ask?
Kamala Harris praised their administration for reducing crime, and then without saying anything to anybody. So just mentioning that before we go to Super Chats, because the White House pats themselves on the back for their good job while flubbing the numbers, and then later quietly updates them, and they did a bad job. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.